Democracy Dialogues. I'm your host, Eric Farnsworth. My guest is Edmundo Gonzalez, overwhelmingly elected on July 28, 2024 by the people of Venezuela, despite long odds and the active efforts of the Maduro regime. The authorities refused to recognize the results, offering no plausible excuse, and Maduro has now reinstalled himself for 6 more years, even as repression deepens. Exiled to Spain, Gonzalez is recognized by the United States and many others as the legitimately elected president of Venezuela. Today, we have him in our studio. Welcome to Democracy Dialogues, Mr. President.
Thank you, Eric, for this opportunity to be with you this afternoon in a cold Washington and to have a chat on the different situations in Venezuela. As you mentioned, we had an election which was clearly endorsed by 7,500,000 voters that vote for my candidacy. As a matter of fact, in many of the voting centers that were placed in the military installations, I won. So that gives you an idea of how is the candidacy of Edmundo Gonzalez in deep in the Venezuelan society.
How broad-based and wide was your election victory? Before we get into that, let me ask you, you're here in Washington for the inauguration of President Trump. You're one of just a handful of foreign leaders invited. What does it feel like to come to the United States during this period of time and to have that opportunity?
Well, it's a very cordial for me to be here after I spent 4.5 years in the early 70s and 80s, in the early 80s. And to be here in Washington again is something that is very comfortable and remind me to good days I spent here. I did my master's degree in American University, SIS school. One of my daughters were born here. And I was talking with the president the other day at the White House, and I remember the day of she was born. I came through one day like this, very cold, windy, and snowing, and I was driving through Wisconsin Avenue to George Washington University Hospital, and my car was doing like this. So,
but we would say fishtailing. Where I'm from Chicago, your car was fishtailing.
Exactly. But it's very, very nice to be here again in Washington. I met with many officials and foreign leaders. I was last night at the ball at one of these evenings and
Inauguration balls.
I spoke with President Milei. I was with him a few weeks ago in Buenos Aires, and we had a very nice conversation with him and also with the foreign minister. And we just briefly met last night, and he was very pleased to see me here again.
Mm-hmm. You have fought for democracy for a long time in Venezuela. Yeah. It's a costly effort. It is individuals. It's not easy. Fighting for democracy is difficult. What gives you hope to carry on in this very difficult battle? What gives you your strength to be able to do that?
It's very costly. And even when they touch your personal matters.
So,
I have a son-in-law who was kidnapped about 2 weeks ago, almost 2 weeks ago, and we don't know still where he is. We know that he was kidnapped by the security services, but we don't know where it is, how he is. He has to take some medicine. We don't know if we have time to do it. I mean, this is a very difficult time for me on personal basis, of course.
Mm-hmm. You've also been exiled to Spain, and you've left behind all of your...
Really, I spent 37 days at the Netherlands embassy. And then I moved to the Spanish embassy, where I was asking for political asylum, and they granted, and they sent me a plane took me to Madrid.
Mm-hmm.
We flew. But I mean, you see that in these days we are fighting for democracy, that we have to pay that cost. is not an easy task.
And that's been since the July 28 elections. You had asylum in the embassies and then exile in Spain, yeah. But as you say, I mean, it's not just yourself. Obviously, you're the most prominent person, but the people of Venezuela, their repression has increased.
There are about, as of now,
Yeah.
around 2,000 political prisoners, according to the human rights activists who handle these matters. Around 2,000 Venezuelans who had been in jail for political matters, for protesting against the government. And I mean, in a democracy, this is something unacceptable. Huh?
Absolutely. Especially today in the Americas.
I said that I have to go out of my country because of politics. That's, in these days, it's unacceptable. Unacceptable.
You know, there was so much hope among Venezuelans and also, frankly, the wider world after the elections, after your resounding victory in the elections. And of course, the regime moved quickly to...
And they didn't recognize it.
Well, of course.
I mean, you got 7 million, almost 7.5 million, and they disregard this like, like you are playing cards. That's unacceptable these days.
Without any plausible explanation of why, and you and your supporters had the vote totals. It was an extraordinary effort.
They don't give you an answer.
Yeah.
I mean, for them, it's not happen. It's like it is not happen.
How do you judge that the mood in the country has shifted among Venezuelans, actually both in Venezuela and outside Venezuela, since January 10, since the Maduro regime reinstalled themselves for 6 years? Is there still a hope and an optimistic future, or are people losing faith? Give a sense of how that important event has changed things.
25 years in power is a long time, and people is fed up.
Yes.
Tired of the same politics, tired of the same language, tired of the same rhetoric, talking about opposition. You see, that cost a lot, and that's a charge in the shoulder that it's not easy to manage.
Do you get a sense that there will be now a new wave of migrants from Venezuela who have perhaps lost hope in the future and are going to seek their fortunes elsewhere? Or
we said during the campaign that the reason for the migrants, the reasons why people leave Venezuela is the Maduro regime.
Yes.
And if they don't accept my candidacy, the people will go out of the country again. The migrant will be as in massively, you see, and the government doesn't understand it.
Do you get a sense that some of your neighbors, Colombia, Brazil, some of the islands in the Caribbean, Panama, other countries, are aware of this and looking to push the Maduro regime so that doesn't happen? Or are they broadly accepting and saying, well, this is our fate?
They are aware that this is a crisis, that for some of them it's unacceptable. I mean, the Colombians has spent a lot of money to receive and granted minimum conditions to Venezuelan migrants living in Bogota, and the streets of Bogota or Cucuta. That cost a lot. It cost a lot for the Colombian government. And that's conditions are unacceptable. They told me once, this is something that I don't know. We don't know how long can we stay with this.
Yeah. But see, that's the point, if I can say, is, the pressure on the neighbors is already intense to absorb migrants from Venezuela.
Exactly.
And the potential of new waves of migrants, one would think perhaps would encourage people to call up Miraflores Paralelos in Caracas and say, please, guys, stop this.
Surely. And take that for granted. If Maduro regime doesn't change, the migration will continue higher and higher.
As we mentioned, you're here in Washington for the inauguration of President Donald Trump. Clearly, you have an agenda with the incoming administration. You met with former President now Joe Biden when you were here in Washington last time. You were received very well in the White House and in Congress and the Senate. Now it's a new administration in Washington. What do you anticipate asking of the new administration? What is your hope that the United States could do, and frankly, the international community more broadly?
I mean, the international community, what we ask is for more pressure on the Maduro regime. That's the only language they understand. Pressure, international pressure, and more international pressure to have a political result. We discussed that with the president, former President Biden, and with some leaders of the new administration as well. I am expecting to have a meeting with Secretary Rubio as soon as he is confirmed. We are sure that he is aware of the situation. I mean, but we want to stress the situation and take them publicly. I mean, you see.
I can confirm that Secretary Rubio is very much aware of the situation. I've testified before him in the U.S. Senate on Venezuela several times, and his questions are always insightful and full of wisdom in terms of the approach. So he clearly knows these issues and feels them in his heart. Do you anticipate that Venezuela will be a high priority in the Trump administration in the context of trying to return democracy to the country, or where do you see that falling out?
I used to say that Venezuela was not a priority in the U.S. foreign policy. I was to say that. But after being here for a few days and talking with some officials, I now have the feeling that Venezuela has become a more interest for the U.S. foreign policy. There's something has been changed in the last few weeks, in the last few months, and I think now they are more interested in having a result in the Venezuelan political crisis.
I think what changed was really the bald theft of election results that were consummated on January 10th. There's no denying that now, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because it was amazing, the results. I mean, more than 7 million voters support my candidacy. And this is a desperate sign of 25 years in power is a lot of time. And this is a very heavy burden they have.
Absolutely. What do you tell your supporters in terms of how do they keep the faith? This is going to continue to be a struggle for democracy in Venezuela. How do you keep folks who really are trying to survive, right? Trying to live their daily lives, get to the grocery store, have jobs, get their children to school. How do you mobilize citizens to take the fight and frankly pay the costs for democratic transition?
Because they know the difference to be living in democracy and living under this regime that restrict their liberties, censure the media, close TV stations, restrictions to the press. They know that, and they know what is the difference between living in a free country with democracy actively, with all the limitations that democracy have, because that's for sure. But this is even better than to live under this regime.
We're here conversing with Edmundo Gonzalez, the president-elect of Venezuela, recognized by the United States and many other countries as the legitimate president of Venezuela. Mr. President, as I say, it's a real honor to have you with us. Give us a sense of what you've been up to since the elections in July to now. You've been traveling the world. You've been to Washington a couple of times. I see your social media feeds from places like the Dominican Republic and obviously Spain and elsewhere. Tell us what you've been up to. How are you mobilizing this effort?
We started about a month ago. We set tour to Europe. We went to Spain, Portugal, Italy. We are going to see the Pope probably in the future. And we are now in the Latin American campaign. We went to Argentina. We met with President Milei, and we hope to see also President de Chile. And we talked with a foreign minister of Colombia. And we keep doing this. We are going to embark in another tour for Latin America in the next few weeks. Message is the same. Help us to have Maduro out of power.
And do you get the sense that the folks that you're talking to are open to that message, receptive to it?
There is
some divergence.
Some difference, of course. And it's not the same to talk with Lula, for instance. or Amorin, who knows Venezuela well, who
Yes.
knows what is going on there. But, you know, this is a political situation, very easy, not very easy.
Mr. President, we have wide viewers here on Democracy Dialogues in the United States, but also around Latin America and frankly around the world. What message would you give to them about your own presidency, the situation of Venezuela today? This is your chance really to say, you know, to the world, this is what you need to know about where we are in Venezuela today.
Well, we don't have to tell them. They have it in all the media and they know easily what is going on in Venezuela. Just look at the press or look at the TV set and see what the difference is. And we push forward to keep on the track to recover the democracy and recover the governance of the country.
You have to think that if the day comes, and I hope it comes soon, that democracy returns to Venezuela, the country as in bad condition as it is after 25 years of Chavismo, that the Venezuelan people, so vibrant, so entrepreneurial, so much love for the country, you would think that if any country has a chance to recover after this, it would be Venezuela and the spirit of the Venezuelan people, no?
Yes, I think we will recover of this tragedy because we can talk about tragedy when you take figures of what we have lost in terms of reduction of oil production, how much they have stolen from the PDVSA and things like that. But we keep in our mission to recover the country. We keep it in the track of the democracy, and we will win sooner than later.
You have our very best wishes for that. And as I say, hopefully that will happen very, very soon. Mr. President, thank you for joining us on Democracy Dialogues. What a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you, same for me.